Not from the Biden administration. Go Steve Bannon.
In the lead up to it, I challenge Benny Thompson today to have the courage to come to this courthouse. If he's going to charge somebody with a crime, he's going to be man enough to show up here or send somebody like Shifty Schiff or Fang Fang Swalwell or send Liz Cheney, send somebody in the committee that has the guts to come here and accuse somebody of a crime. It is outrageous. And for them to sit there and try to get a complete hearing and they won't bring in any testimony about FBI involvement, any testimony about DHS involvement, any testimony about any other involvement, and what's driving this. The total and complete illegitimacy of Joe Biden. Trump won. Joe Biden.
All right, folks, that's Steve Bannon yesterday outside of the courthouse in D.C., where he is being tried for the awful crime of contempt of Congress. We covered that in some detail yesterday. We looked at the subpoena, and we looked a little bit about the law there. It really is the sign of the times that we're living right now. I mean, we are living in an era where so much of our problems are self-inflicted. And there's basically self-inflicted by, I don't know if it's 50% of the population. I think it's lower. But when we get to this new tip poll out there about the environment, we're going to see that it's probably in the high 30s. But a lot of what's going on, somebody is famous on Twitter tweeted out that 100% of our problems are caused by the fake news media. And he's wrong about that. They're not created by the fake news media. The fake news media feeds this 30-some-odd% of people who are insane. And it's all this big feedback loop that we talk about all the time. But God bless Bannon for, having the conas come out there and say that, because he's absolutely right. And part of the problem we've got is, folks, we don't have a working media. I mean, if the media were covering this, if people knew that basically this was a misunderstanding at best. I criticized Bannon yesterday. I criticized his attorney, yesterday. I said he should have communicated more promptly. But setting that aside, one of the things I hope I made clear yesterday, if I didn't, I'm going to make it clear now, is that these types of things are normally worked out in the course of events. Just to give you an example, this morning I had to go down to one of the southern counties, Henry County, Georgia, which is a good hour south of here, and had to go there basically over a quote-unquote discovery dispute, which is what's going on here. And people can get into discovery disputes if they want, and they won't get along or work together. And that's what's happened to me in this one. And so one of the interesting things about discovery disputes, at least on the civil side, and I'm assuming they have something similar on the criminal side, is normally before you can involve a judge or go to a court, you have to quote-unquote attempt to work it out in good faith. And so right now, Bannon has basically agreed to testify. So it's been worked out, but the Justice Department and the January 6th committee are in a most petty fashion continuing to go after Bannon for this, right? And so I just want you to understand part of the reason they're doing that has nothing really to do with Bannon and has everything to do with what we talked about yesterday. It's just a power play to them. It's just one more piece of freedom. When you go to law school and you learn about property, one of the things they will teach you about property is property rights are like a bundle of sticks, right? And so to have complete property rights over, say, for example, a house, you've got to have, every bundle in your quiver, right? So one bundle would be the actual property itself. Another bundle would be a deed. Another bundle would be actual possession of it, right? What if somebody gets into your house and locks you out, right? You don't have possession. You don't have 100% of that property. And so what they're doing is the same thing with sort of a constitutional republic. They're just one by one trying to pull another stick out. We're probably, let's say we started at 100, we're probably down to 40 or 45 or something like that. I mean, we're losing rights left and right. And that's what I wanted to emphasize yesterday. This is something that hasn't happened in a long time. And you've had Washington at each other's throats. I mean, you had Watergate. You had the Reagan administration, the Bush administration. People weren't getting along at all. I mean, this is something that's been going on for quite some time. But even then, it wasn't as bad and as partisan and just rank hypocrisy that we see now. And that's exactly what Bannon is about. We will see what happens. It looks to be, and basically, I don't know if you heard what he was saying there, but basically he was saying, one, he's calling those people out and continuing the election denial stuff, which gets you in trouble. I'm glad he did it, but somewhat off topic. The other thing he said was they've basically limited what he's allowed to bring up. So he's not allowed to bring up that it's an unconstitutional committee, and it is an unconstitutional committee. But again, a Trump judge looked at it. This judge that Bannon has here is a Trump judge, and he won't let him bring that argument up. Now, to be fair, the judge is following precedent. But do you think if this were reversed and this were a Democrat judge trying to help, like in the Sussman case, do you think he would follow precedent? Or you think he'd say, oh, yeah, I'll let you challenge it. Oh, yeah, I declare it unconstitutional. See ya. And then go up to see what the D.C. Circuit would say and then see what the Supreme Court would say? Absolutely, you know they would. That's why I saw today that Biden got his 73rd judicial appointee, right? And every time Schumer tweets that out, he talks about how qualified they are. And we covered several months back how the ABA, who's very, very left, is rating some of these people as not qualified. That's why they're going on the bench, folks, because they lack compunction. They're just going to do whatever they need to do to favor their side. So anyway, yesterday we had some interesting quote-unquote news, and I tweeted this out earlier today. You know, there's nothing about the Democrat Party at this point that's fake. Not fake, I'm sorry. I mean, everything that they represent is fake. I can't think of a single solitary thing that they represent that's real. I mean, you could argue abortion, but because the way they present it, it's essentially fake, right? They present it as, oh, this poor innocent woman, you know, she had no idea, and she's just, she's worried about this, and she's really concerned, and she's gone to her pastor, her doctor, her family, and this has been like a 6-month ordeal for her. That's not what happens, and they know it, and especially now they know it, right? So even that is not something real, but everything else they talk about is not real, and the reason that they do that is, we're going to get to this tip poll in a bit about the climate, but part of the reason they do it, there's a lot of reasons, right? And again, this is the type of thing, you know, you talk about the perfect storm, and the perfect storm is all these different ingredients come together to create a very powerful storm that, you know, for example, produces a 100-year flood or something like that. Well, a perfect storm happens in politics. It happens in history. So where I'm sitting right now in Atlanta, there was a little girl named Mary Fagan that was murdered about 5 miles away in a pencil factory. And the proprietor of the pencil factory ended up getting accused and convicted of the murder, even though everyone knew he didn't do it, right? And he ended up getting pardoned eventually, wasn't pardoned. The governor eventually commuted his sentence from death to life, and that wasn't good enough for the Georgians, so they busted him out of prison in Milledgeville and drove him up to Gwinnett, or I guess it was Cobb County, and hung him, right, or lynched him, if you will. A white man, by the way, just in case you're curious if there was any lynching of white people or think it's exclusively black. Another thing the Democrats fake and lie about. But anyway, it took a perfect storm. If you read that story, it took child labor being a big issue at the time, problems that the Jewish community was facing in Atlanta, an incompetent police department, a prosecutor in Atlanta who'd had a bad streak and was looking to get a victory any way he could, right? A judge who knew what was going on, was a show trial, but, you know, was too old and just figured, you know what? I mean, the Court of Appeals, somebody will fix this along the way. I don't need to worry about it. I mean, all those things had to happen to get us here. And similarly with the Democrats, a lot of these things have to happen to get us here. One, you have to have a media complex that's essentially just for the Democrat Party. I mean, they are the communication wing of the Democrat Party. You have to have a bunch of people, a group of people who've grown up and haven't been educated and can't actually think. I mean, if you've dealt with any of these younger people like AOC's age, they are not only just mentally unstable in that the world is what they want it to be. Whatever they want, they get. The other big problem if you deal with them is, and I have to deal with them all the time in the law. This thing I went to court, luckily it got continued, but this thing I went to court with this morning all got created because a younger lawyer, I think he's in his early 30s, on the other side, just decided this was the way it went. And I tried to explain, no, this is not the way it goes. And then finally, at the end of the day, this may sound familiar with you, I just said, look, I disagree with your legal interpretation. Let's just move on, agree to disagree. And I get the phone hung up on me, right? Next thing you know, there's this big motion that's literally about a half inch, and he wants $1,500 of attorney's fees. We'll see how it turns out, but anyway, that's what it's like dealing with these people. And you can't reason with them. You can't explain, like what I was trying to explain to this person was just very straightforward, simple concepts here, right? And you can't shake them. Once they get something in their head, you can't shake them from it. In fact, I'll tell you what it was, because it's not even that inside baseball. You can understand what it is. So they served discovery requests on us, and then for my client, I prepared responses, right? And they're interrogatories where they ask you questions, and then they ask for a bunch of documents. And I said, look, we've produced a bunch of documents, right? We're going to produce a bunch of documents, and those documents will answer all of the various questions that you asked. And he said, no, you can't do that. You have to actually refer. You have to go in there and say which document and where specifically in the document to do it. And I said, I don't agree with that. I think you can just produce the documents, and if the documents are small enough and short enough and direct enough about the information that you want, right, then you don't need to do that. And here was the major point, though, where there's really no disagreement. At that point, you can have a reasonable disagreement, which we did. But I said, look, why don't you wait till I get you the docs? Let me send them over to you. Then we'll get back on the phone. And if you've got a problem, if you don't think your questions are answered from these documents, then we'll get on the phone and we'll discuss it further. And he kept just saying, no, you have to do it this way. You have to do it this way. I said, again, I don't agree. Let me get you the documents, and then we'll have another click. And then I get a motion. Right? And this is what it's like dealing with these people. And folks, I say this all the time, law is downstream from politics, and culture is downstream from politics. And I see all the time, I don't cover it on this podcast, but I see all the time all this violence that's going on. It's usually some black person, usually attacking some Asian or white person who's a little bit more elderly. Now, you can't tell me that's not being influenced by all this hate. We're going to get some of the hate in a bit. That minorities are being taught to hate white people. But anyway, back to the fake. So basically, the squad, Omar, a bunch of the other people, that's all they do. That's all they are, is 24/7 fake. And again, you can understand why they want to do it. I mean, in some of their cases, they're so deluded that they actually believe it. And in other cases, they may not be deluded. But again, I'll give you two options. You can get up in the morning, right, and you can go out there and do hard work, do real research, come up with a solution to a problem that may not agree precisely with what you think it is, right? That's option A, right? 20, 30 hours of work, real. Or option B, you can spend 5 minutes and come up with a stunt and get votes. Which one do you think the average human being is going to do if both are equally successful? In fact, ironically, we've now created a situation where option A isn't as effective. But let's assume for the sake of the argument they're equally effective, right? Obviously, their average person is going to do B. That's why you see very little journalism. It's all one, they've been taught that you can't do both sides. That's wrong because Republicans are Hitler, right? And then the other thing is it's laziness, right? You're going to go 2, 3, 4, 5 hours of research, write an article, or you're just going to basically blurt your opinion out in about 10 minutes and then go drink beer or Chardonnay for the rest of the day. I know what most humans are going to do, and the reason they didn't do it before, folks, was because they couldn't get away with it. But anyway, yesterday, here's what it sounded like. I'm going to have to describe it for you, for those that are on the podcast. But anyway, this is what it sounded like outside of the Supreme Court yesterday with the squad out there, quote-unquote, protesting. So that's AOC. She's a house member. You hear she's a house member. That's AOC walking with a Capitol Police officer, has her by the arm. She's like she's being perp walked.
No, she's a member of the House.
So more being walked. Again, if you're not careful, you'd think, and then, there you go. Finally, the video shows she's not handcuffed. So why is she walking with her hands behind her back like an old college professor, musing, right, with a Capitol Police officer with a hand on his arm, right? Why is she fake being arrested? Well, I don't even know. I didn't really cover the story beyond that because, first and foremost, you're a member of the House. You don't really need to go, quote-unquote, protest. You can do a lot more. I mean, you got a lot of power, right? There's only, 535 of them? Or 435, sorry. 435, 3 from D.C., whatever, something like that. Anyway, you can actually do something. So she goes and quote-unquote protests. She's not protesting. Then she has to make some sort of stunt statement about being arrested. Nobody arresting protesters out there. I mean, you go ask Kavanaugh what's going on. There's a story out there that his neighbors, so his neighbors are getting called names. I mean, it's just crazy. Anyway, so another story out there, Colbert's crew behavior in Capitol Complex caused Democrat staffer to call for emergency help. Capitol Police Chief says Colbert 9 were warned several times before arrest, slams prosecutor's decision not to press charges as, quote, unfortunate. Stephen Colbert's comedy crew was warned several times it could not trespass on Capitol grounds, and his behavior in Congressional Office Building during an unauthorized nighttime visit was so boisterous it caused a Democrat congressman's staff to fear for his safety and to call for emergency help. Anyway, those charges have now been dropped. Folks, you are officially living in a banana republic. when you have a two-tier justice system and Democrats do not get prosecuted while Republicans not only get prosecuted, but much more harshly, you basically do not have a republic. And all these people that are claiming they care about democracy and we're a democracy and all this stuff is just nuts. Anyway, so the Republicans, as useless as they are, I mean, folks, Republicans now are not so much a vote for Republicans. They're really a vote for, anti-Democrat. I mean, you may have some Trump people or some Trump-type politicians that may actually have a real following out there. I know, for example, maybe Ted Cruz or Ron Paul, some of these people, but Rand Paul. But basically, the Republican Party is just, quote unquote, well, I mean, the Democrats are just crazy, and they're bleeding us dry every which way but loose. So we got to vote for Republicans, but they're kind of useless. And here's a story that proves that. Trump wanted Pence to reject votes for Biden. A new bill would prevent that. Well, again, we've gone over this many, many times. Tomorrow we will cover the supposedly last January 6th. We will live stream it at 8 o'clock if you want to come over to the YouTube channel and check it out. But, folks, that's not what the plan was. The plan was to use the Electoral Count Act of 1887 to file objections and have debates. And some of the people that, quote-unquote, objected, like Ted Cruz and others, they're basically saying, look, I wasn't really trying to, quote-unquote, overturn the election. I was trying to get some audits or some election things fixed. But all I need to know about the election to know it was illegitimate is that to this date, there have been no audits. To this date, they've not shown us anything. I mean, that just proves it. I mean, if it was really as honest as they said it was, they would just show it to us, and they haven't. But anyway, so there's a bipartisan group, but we don't know if they've got 10 rhinos yet. Okay, they appear to have 8, maybe 9. We shall see. But they are talking about amending the Electoral Count Act of 1887. Not a good thing, folks. Not from what I see. Anyway, a bipartisan group of 16 senators on Wednesday released legislation that would clarify an 1887 law that then President Donald Trump and his allies used as part of their attempt to overturn the 2020 election results. Again, more lies by the Washington Post. You see, it's not a result until it's certified, folks. That's when it becomes certified. Challenging the certification is not trying to overturn anything. You're not elected yet, right? But anyway, let it go. And they're not trying to clarify anything. The law says what it says. They're overhauling it, changing it, right? The legislation, which comes after months of negotiations, would attempt to more clearly define the role of states, presidential electors, and the vice president in a presidential election in an effort to prevent events on January 6, 2021 in the future. Well, I don't know what it's designed to prevent because we had a 4-hour pause, and then basically they certified it. So I don't know what they're talking about. Anyway, long story short, the proposals here, the proposals led by Susan Collins, and you hear more. It's obviously not a good thing. And Joe Manchin, normally a rational person, also makes it more difficult for Congress to raise an objection to state results in a presidential election. The 19th century law allows for one member and one senator to raise an objection. The proposal raises the objection threshold to 1/5 of the House and the Senate. Now, folks, just to let you know where that is, that would be 20 in the Senate. Trump had 8. Now, I think he had the requisite 1/5 in the House, but he did not have it in the Senate. It is a bad idea. I don't have a problem maybe raising the threshold to, say, 2, from 1 to 2, but from 1 to 20%, I mean, 20% of the House is like 80 some odd. I mean, 20% of the Senate is 20. Why would you go from 1 to 20 and 1 to like 130 or something, or 80? It makes no sense. None of this makes any sense. All over something that didn't work the way they claimed. If they really want to clarify how the Electoral Count Act works, right, they could do that by just clarifying what the vice president's role is over the procedure. So anyway, we'll see how that goes. It's going to have to go back, and they're going to have to get 10. What I read in the article, apparently they have 9. So they'll need at least one more Republican out there. We shall see what happens. So this caught my eye from The Athletic. The Athletic is one of these, actually does really good sports writing. Excellent sports writing. And I really would like to subscribe to it. But, it's a pay service, and it's not cheap. And so I subscribed to it once, and they don't come up with enough articles to make it worthwhile for me. But anyway, I caught this story that I thought we would just, again, one of these things where we don't need agreement, but let's just be clear what's going on. And the Democrat Party is increasingly neo-racist, okay? And it is increasingly okay to be racist against white people, especially white men, but white people, all right? And let's just be clear about that, all right? I mean, I don't agree with it, obviously. They do. They think it's fine. They think racism is fine. It's not neo-racism. It's just plain old racism. But anyway, they don't look like me. It's off-putting. England women, and a lack of non-white role models. I watch and support England, but for me, the French team, I love it. It's beautiful. That's what football should look like. Why are France able to get it right, but we're struggling when we're such a diverse country? I'm supporting England, but who can say I relate or look like? That can be off-putting. Hannah Baptiste, a former England under-6 youth international who now plays senior football for Ghana, is not the only one who feels disconnected when watching the England's women's team at Euro 2022. It's a bit disheartening. Visibility is important, says Amanita Lewis from Newham. The 18-year-old, a huge fan of France striker Marie-Antoinette Katato, has recently got a scholarship to play college football in America, having been a part of West Ham's United development team. That's why I look up at other teams like France and Paris Saint-Germain, because they have that diversity. If you see someone that looks like you believe that you can do it yourself, right? And it goes on and on and on. And it talks about, you scroll down a little bit, you'll see that apparently in 2001, 10% of the British squad was non-white. And then in 5, 7, 9, 2011, and 2013, it went from 25, 28, 22, 23%, and 21.7%. Then it dropped down again in 2015 to 13%, 17, 13%, 2019, 8.7%, and then 2022 back up to 13%. Now, I didn't have time to look up the diversity of Great Britain, and England, whatever. I don't care. I don't care what it is. I'm guessing it's probably a little bit more non-white than that, so they're slightly underrepresented. It looks like they were probably a little overrepresented with minorities in 5, 7, 9, 11, and 13. But the point remains the same, folks. If I were to come out and go, it's really off-putting to look at the NBA and see that white people are underrepresented, right? What if I did that? What if I said, it's just for me. I can't cheer for them because they don't look like me. They don't look like me, so I can't cheer for that. I mean, can you imagine? I mean, think about this. Can you just imagine 10 years ago somebody not just thinking it, saying it, but writing it and going viral and a bunch of people supporting it, folks? This is this insane crowd that I was telling you about early. This is them. This is what they believe. They think it's perfectly fine to look at a woman's team. And again, nowhere in this article do they argue that there's some discrimination or that people are good enough to make the team and aren't making the team due to discrimination. None of that. It's just purely optics. You got to put black people on there, right? And again, I don't want agreement. I just want us to be clear on what's going on. So there was a ruling yesterday in the Elon Musk Twitter fight. Twitter wins bid for quick trial in Elon Musk lawsuit. Here's why this could be bad tidings for our friend Elon. Okay, a judge ruled on Tuesday, so that would be yesterday, a trial addressing Twitter's lawsuit against Tesla CEO Elon Musk will take place over the course of 5 days in October 2022. A win for the social media platform following a bitter hearing in which Twitter's attorney called Musk a liar and said he was trying to avoid a reckoning for backing out of his $44 million deal to buy the platform. Now, folks, this is the Chancellery Court in Delaware, and this is going to be, I believe it's going to be a bench trial, okay? So I don't think you get a jury up there. And this is why this is a harbinger, could be of bad things to come. The Delaware courts have been pretty good traditionally, and here's why. They value tremendously their reputation as being pro-business, as being a favorable environment for business. And what business likes is the rule of law. Business likes certainty, right? Even if, in other words, if Musk knows that under these facts, 90% of the time he loses, he can plan for that. He can figure out how he's going to come up with the $44 billion. He can do what he needs to do. If it's just a crapshoot, know what's going to happen, then he can't plan for it. It doesn't help anybody. It hurts everybody eventually because we end up paying higher prices. We get businesses like Twitter, which are awful and poorly run and really should be going bankrupt, right? And if this goes through, right, then basically Twitter and its incompetence is going to be bailed out by all of us, right? Because the money that Elon Musk has is quote unquote his, but it's really our wealth to some degree that he's earned. And if he is having to pay for it, he's going to end up having to pay for it by us having to pay more for Twitter, right? Anyway, nothing good comes from this. And the reason I think this could be a bad sign is there's no reason this needs to be expedited at all. In October, I mean, it's late July. So we're talking about October 25th. Let's assume they're going to start October 20th, right? That would be August, September, right? October. We're talking 3 months. Folks, you can barely breathe in 3 months, a case this big. And Musk needs a lot of discovery because he wants to know about the bots. He wants to know about what they've done. And trust me, being on Twitter, I can tell you that since Musk started the acquisition, Twitter changed hugely. For me, a lot. I went from having about 150,000 impressions a day on average without breaking a sweat to now about 25,000 impressions a day. I went to picking up 50 to 70 new followers a day. I think I'm flat for the last 3 weeks. I mean, I pick up a lot of followers, but then I lose a lot of followers. And I don't know why I'm losing them. So that was pretty rare. I almost never lost followers before. So something's going on. I don't know what it is. And that thing is manipulated. You can tell it's manipulated. You can tell they make things go up that otherwise wouldn't go up. They make things trend that wouldn't otherwise trend. So I think that if given time, he's going to be able to prove that they breached the deal, right? But we shall see. Again, I think this is a bad sign, but only time will tell. And again, there's a reason why Twitter doesn't want them getting in there kicking the tires. And one thing that a lot of people misunderstand and misstate about this, I read a little bit about this earlier today. A lot of people think that Musk waived due diligence. That's not what happened, because I read the complaint. What happened was he said, I won't do due diligence. Instead, I want you to change all of these covenants into actual contractual provisions, which is to say, I don't need to go in and check the bots. Just you certify the bots are no more than 5%. You certify that you do diligence to make sure that that's a reasonable number that you've given me. And when he's going to be able to go in and prove that they didn't do any such thing. So I think he's going to be able to win the trial. And I think part of the reason why Twitter doesn't want the discovery is they're hoping to run out the clock so that he can't get the actual information he needs. And folks, having litigated for 25 years, I can tell you how this works. He'll send document requests. He'll send interrogatories. We were talking about it earlier in the show, right? Now, typically, you get 30 days to respond to those. Now, I would assume if the judge expedited, and this is only 3 months before you go to trial, I'm assuming she's also going to make them, expedited responses. So maybe you have to respond in 2 weeks. But then let's just say they respond and they don't give you anything. Well, then you got to get time to get before the judge. Then you got to argue about what you should get. Then they're going to make excuses about going in and getting it. I mean, a lot of things could happen. And so if they just delay, and then he can't establish that they didn't do some of these things, that's how I think they think they're going to win the lawsuit. Interesting. But it will be interesting. Obviously, they've got something to hide. Anybody that's been on Twitter or has had any significant, and I don't have a significant presence, but I mean I've got over 32,000 followers, so it's a big, quote unquote, big account for Twitter for the average person, and you can just see what goes on. I mean, things that there's also something that doesn't happen as much because I don't sit there and watch as much as I used to. But back when I used to pay a lot more time to Twitter, I would literally tweet something, and you would see the computer suppress it in real time. So you would hit it, and then it would have an engagement rate of like 400%, which is impossible. It's not possible to have that kind of engagement rate. But what would happen was, the tweet would go out, right, and then say 10 people would see it and then react to it, and then Twitter would stop it. So then there would only be like 8 impressions, but then would be 10 reactions. And so that you would have a more than 100% reaction rate. That's just not possible. So anyway, we'll see what he's able to discover from Twitter. I think this is also a situation where these people are so used to getting away. I mean, the media is not calling out AOC and her fake arrest, right? So they're not going to call out Twitter and their incompetence either. So we'll see how that lawsuit turns out. It's really just getting going. One other thing you need to know is that Elon was given until August 1st to file his counterclaim, which is going to be important because the counterclaim is obviously going to want to get out of the deal, and he's probably going to want some fees and things. So, wow, we were really moving fast out there. So Pete Buttigieg has been making the rounds, telling a bunch of climate change nonsense. And so he was before Congress yesterday. I think today he's going around some of the shows. And this is a common thing you're hearing from Pete Buttigieg out there. Take a listen.
Of course, the more pain we are all experiencing from the high price of gas, the more benefit there is for those who can access electric vehicles.
So, folks, they're doing this on purpose. And again, the problem we've got is the communication structure. Really, they shouldn't be able to lie. And I don't even really know why the media lets them get away with it, because Biden said we'll work it out. We're going to end it. We're going to stop it. That's what they've been saying. And then Buttigieg is doing this thing about as soon as everybody switches over to electric vehicles, the better off we'll be. They've been saying this, folks. Again, this is why history is important. I remember this from back in my law school days, 1994, when you get out of college, you don't hear as many people talk as much sophisticatedly about politics as you do to get to law school. You had a lot of people that were really into it then. That's when you first start hearing the talk about these carbon taxes. And carbon taxes, all these things were basically designed to make fuel more expensive so that people then have to, well, the two things they wanted to do. One, they wanted to get rid of the fossil fuels. And then two, they wanted you to go to mass transit. That's why when you go to Europe, mass transit is so much more developed because their gas prices over there, they've been paying what we're paying here now, I mean, for decades and decades. I mean, probably since the 70s and 80s, right? Now, they're also a lot more closer together, and the trains were how they can, they had a big infrastructure out there before we did. A lot of people forget, the car, I mean, the choo-choo definitely preceded the car, but it wasn't that far ahead of it, right, in America, right? So we didn't have a huge, tremendous railroad system out there, but in Europe, it really did. I mean, they had a much, much better developed railroad system, so it made it easier for them to go to mass transit more quickly than we did. But that's what's going on. So he's out there doing what he has to do. I mean, Pompous Pete goes around, and he is a very he's a very polished guy. He has a good way of speaking. He's very well spoken. I'll give him that. But just about everything that comes out of his mouth is a lie. But he's one of these people. It'd be a tough call. He may be deluded enough to believe this stuff just because of the way he grew up and the way his mind works. He may just sort of have cognitive dissonance to the point where he believes this stuff. But anyway, a lot of people do. And I said earlier about the 35% of the people in this country that are just bonkers and not very well developed people. And, unfortunately, they're very, very politically active, and now they're getting more active. So anyway, there's a tip poll that came out recently. Americans want cheap oil, less green policies. That's the headline, okay? This is from yesterday. Only 32% of Americans back President Joe Biden's climate change policy, even if it means higher energy prices, according to an INI tip poll released Monday. Now, folks, 32%, think about that, back climate change policy of the Democrats, which is full-on stop fossil fuels today, which means you're going to have rolling blackouts, you're not going to have air conditioner, if you don't have an electric car, that's what they want. That's insane. However, 57% expressed discontent, stating that they either disagreed with the president's policies and want more and cheaper energy, 41%, don't think climate change should be a U.S. policy priority, 10%, or don't even believe in climate change, 6%. So I'm obviously in that group, as you know. Anyway, folks, this headline does not match it to me, right? Americans want cheap oil. 57%, folks. Reagan got more than that when he ran for re-election. Okay, folks, we are getting dangerously to the point where this 32%, who's insane, but they're so active they have disproportionate power, right? And they don't believe in reality. And if you don't function in reality and you have a whole system that makes you believe that you are Batman or you are Superman, you got problems. Anyway, the NPR, goes on. So it says, here's a few other things. Other results from the poll indicate among Democrats, 58% say they agree with Biden's climate change policies, while 30% say they disagree, with 24% saying they want more energy and cheaper prices. Now, folks, you got to understand, part of the reason we got here is we went to being a divided nation to being a party, the Democrat Party, because of our infrastructure, because of all the institutions are Democrats. Now, they no longer care about bipartisanship. They no longer care about having, a lot of people behind them, right? It's just you got to get to 50.1% and then you rule. So when you look at Biden, it shouldn't surprise you that he's balls to the wall in this climate stuff, because 58% of his own party are fully on board with it, okay? By the flip side, a large majority of Republicans, 86%, either reject Biden's green policies and higher energy prices, say climate change shouldn't be a policy, or don't even believe climate change is real. All right. Among independents, the percentage who answered in the negative was 66%, by saying they either disagreed with the president's policies and want more and cheaper energy, don't think climate change should be a U.S. policy, or don't even believe climate is changing. Anyway, so folks, what that poll shows me is what I say all the time, is that's right around the percentage, 32, 33, 34, 35%, somewhere in there. A third of the people don't live in reality, right? Racism, the reason that America's bad is because it's systemically racist, that it's okay to want to see more black people in something, but it's not okay to want to see more white people. It's perfectly fine to be racist against white people, but not okay to be racist against. I mean, these people are just insane. And unfortunately, we used to have a system that kind of, kept them in the back, and they weren't able to control things. Now, not only do they come out front and center, and I mean, look at the two people that went over to Bastille that represented, America over there. I mean, it was a cross-dressing man and a binary. I'm not even sure what she identified. I can't even keep it up. But I mean, these people that used to be discouraged and basically like, look, you don't need to be running things, and we can't do what you want because you don't understand reality. And we are burning fossil fuels to produce the very electricity that these cars run on. I mean, do you understand the nonsensicalness of this? Do you understand that if we go to green energy tomorrow, we're not ready, and we're all, everything will grind to a halt? They don't understand that, and yet they have a lot of power. And when they get to the point, folks, where they're 35, 36, 37, and getting into the 40s, there's no stopping them. I mean, there'll be no stopping them at that point. And unfortunately, one of the things that you can say that the Hispanic vote is going over to the Republicans, and that's largely true. But while at the same time that's happened, I don't know if it's happening fast enough as the country's youth is becoming more and more and more bought into these types of policies, which is to say the younger generations, they're coming up, they are not taught reality. They're taught to believe whatever they want to be true. And that's a very dangerous place to be. So anyway, you were basically all caught up in the news of the day halfway into the show because it has been a really, really slow news day. I think a lot of people are just on vacation, and they're trying to clear the way for the January 6th committee, which has been something they've been commonly doing. But anyway, you're all caught up to date, and if you like the live stream, I hope you tune back in tomorrow.